Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Kentucky Monthly Climate Perspective on Drought and Hydrologic Conditions for May 2020. I am Megan Schargorodski of the Kentucky Climate Center and Kentucky Mesonet at Western Kentucky University. Today we will run slightly longer than normal due to a couple of guest presentations. Matt Dixon and John Strang from the University of Kentucky and the Kentucky Ag Weather Center will discuss agricultural and horticultural impacts that we'll see in the near future. Chip Zimmer of the Kentucky Division of Water will introduce the Kentucky Drought and Hydrologic Impact Reporter. And the main presenter today will be Stuart Foster, who is the state climatologist and director of the Kentucky Climate Center. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to him so we can get started.
Thank you very much, Megan, and welcome everybody to today's webinar. It's nice to have the sun shining out there. Again, we've been doing these on a monthly basis. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time, the first Thursday of the month, and our next webinar will be on June 4th. This webinar series is presented in partnership with the National Integrated Drought Information System and in coordination with the Midwest Drought Early Warning System, and reflects the contribution of numerous partners across the state of Kentucky, as evidenced by our list of presenters here today. And this webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing at a later time. So we'll start out with a summary of recent conditions, with temperature and precipitation, soil moisture, stream flow, down to drought and flooding conditions, whichever might be pressing in a given month. And then this month in particular, we've got a good bit to talk about in terms of impacts, particularly in the agricultural sector. Once we come back from that, we'll take a look at the outlooks. How does it look going forward here over the next few weeks, to the monthly outlook for May, and then a seasonal perspective as we start to look toward the summer months. We'll then come back and summarize this presentation, have a little bit of time for any questions and discussion. And then at that point, we're going to shift, and we've got a special presentation, as Megan mentioned, from Chip Zimmer with the Kentucky Division of Water. So here we've got a couple photos on the left. Again, the first one, rather picturesque shot over in Fulton County near the Mississippi River. You can see some rain off in the distance, a pretty common view around lately. And then in the bottom is one of our newest cameras in Lewis County. And we want to give a shout out to the folks there in Lewis County and the County Ag Development Board that helped to provide some funding to support that camera. That's a shot taken down in a valley setting and an area that's prone to some of these late season frosts here with the cold air settling down in the valley. So again, we'll hear some more about that later on. So Megan, let's move forward and take a look at precipitation over the last period and see where we stand. So we're looking at the past 30 days. April 6th through May 5th. Those are Kentucky Mesonet observations printed on the screen, the numbers, and the background is the mosaic of estimated precipitation amounts from National Weather Service radar. So those ground-based observations work in sync with the radar that has to be calibrated based on what's happening on the ground. So they should match up pretty well. You can see here that the areas in the south and east of Kentucky received quite a bit more rainfall over the last 30 days than areas to the north and west. The heavier amounts in the southeast above 6 inches for that period, whereas if we get over to the Owensboro, Henderson area and a little bit farther west, we're looking at amounts that were in the 2 to 3 inch range for the most part. And then we'll move forward in a 60-day perspective. Really a similar kind of pattern, heavier amounts over that 60-day period in the south and east, a little bit lower amounts in the north and west. Really a pretty consistent rainfall pattern over that the last 30 days, and then the previous 30 days before that. The patterns again are very similar. Again, the numbers on the map are a little bit hard to read, but if you look in the far southeast, you'll see one number that kind of cuts across the state boundary, or a drainage basin boundary, 21.14 inches. That's the station located on top of Black Mountain. That's over 4,000 feet up, and you can definitely see the orographic effects of elevation, providing some heavier precipitation amounts at that location. And then otherwise, as you run along the Ohio River, you're looking at lower amounts that are 10 inches down to about 7 or 8 inches over that period. And again, all in all, still tracking pretty well for this time of year. So we'll branch out a little bit farther back now and take a look at 90-day totals. And there again, the general pattern is the same. We're looking at 90-day totals in excess of 20 inches in the southeast, over 30 inches on Black Mountain, and then running along the Ohio River, we're looking at amounts in the 11, 12, 13, 14 inch range for that part of the state. And now if we go to the next slide, we can kind of put that into perspective, looking at what's considered normal rainfall. So in the upper left, you see the past 30 days, in the upper right, the past 60 days, and then the 90 days. And again, this is showing percent of normal precipitation. The sort of bluish purple, the darkest purple or color, is areas that are 200 to 300% of normal precipitation over that period. And so you can really see that those stand out in the 30-day and 60-day periods. So again, it's been a very persistent precipitation track there. The drier areas in the browns and yellows are areas that are actually below normal precipitation, down in the range of about 75 to 90%, thereabouts in those areas. So we are getting some parts of the state where we're starting to see some drying, and given the need for farmers to get out and do field work and planting, that's probably actually kind of welcome this time of year. So when you look at that, you see the very strong southeast and northwest gradient distinguish the above normal and below normal areas in terms of precipitation. And really the last 30 and 60-day periods stand out in terms of that heavy precipitation in the southeast. This is a graph that we've plugged in periodically, the 24-month standardized precipitation index. And again, we've talked about this before, but we're looking at essentially a running 24-month or 2-year window on precipitation. Each month, when it comes to a close, we add that month of precipitation, and then we drop the one off from the trailing end of that. And then it's standardized so that a zero value essentially represents normal over the historical time frame. So as you look at this, the portions of the curve that are above zero are wet periods. And if you look at the current time, again, two things continue to stand out. One is that we are in the longest, most prolonged wet spell in our climatological record going back to 1895. And secondly, the intensity of that wet period, or magnitude of it, far exceeds anything we've recorded in the past, going back to the other periods that were particularly wet in the 70s and back to around the 1950s, early 50s, late 40s period. So again, truly a remarkable period here in Kentucky's climatological history over the last century plus. Moving on to temperatures, last month we were looking at maps that showed a lot of above normal temperature deviations. This month it's the opposite. So on the left side we can see that The average daily maximum temperatures have been running cool. The northeastern part of Kentucky, we're even talking in the 4 degrees or more below normal in terms of the highs. Not quite as cold in the west, or as far below normal. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the departures for the average minimum temperature. And again, we're running about a couple degrees below normal, different parts of the state. So again, nothing that you're not aware of if you've been outdoors too much this month. We really switched over last month. Again, we started in a very warm period, and when we were talking about the outlooks, we mentioned that somewhere around the middle of April, there was a good bit of uncertainty and that things might change, and they certainly did. In fact, they changed a little sooner than the outlook suggested, and we've persisted in that very much colder pattern for now going on close to a month. Soil moisture and groundwater levels, lots of green on the left. We're in the 99th percentile in terms of soil moisture in southeastern Kentucky, which extends up into West Virginia, and generally doing well above historical averages in terms of soil moisture. And on the right side, if we look a little deeper in terms of groundwater levels, again, there's a lot of blue there indicating that we are very wet compared to historical periods there. Again, nothing that I don't think we're not aware of already. The next slide. Okay, here we're looking at some selected soil moisture graphs from some of our mesonet stations, and we swapped out and put some different stations in this month. Keeping in mind that, again, southeastern part of the state has been particularly wet. The graph in the bottom right is from Quicksand there in Breathitt County, and you can see that we're looking at a whole year's worth of soil moisture levels, and since we recovered from the flash drought back in September, October, soils have recharged very well, and they're still holding very high. I really don't see any change from the earlier this spring and over the winter months there. If you look at the top on the left, that's Crittenden County, and on the top right is Boone County, just across from Cincinnati. So again, soil moisture looks pretty good, but you can see those areas where it's been a little bit drier, that we're starting to see soil moisture levels drop off a little bit. Haven't dropped off too much. Again, noting that we've been colder than normal, so haven't had quite as much evapotranspiration as we might otherwise. In the lower left, we're looking at LaRue County, and again, that's kind of in that transitionary zone between below normal precipitation and getting toward the above normal precipitation. And again, the soil moisture there is holding up very well this time of year, which normally we would expect to be the case. Since we're moving back toward the warm season, we're bringing back the evaporative demand drought index, or EDDI. And we have the 1 week version on the left-hand side, and then the averaged out over the whole month, that monthly version on the right side. Again, the EDDI, if you're not familiar with it, is a drought index that essentially measures the atmospheric thirst for water or moisture. So it factors in temperature, humidity, solar radiation, wind speed, and when we get hot and very dry air and breezy conditions, lots of sunshine, that's when the atmosphere really wants to extract water out of the environment. We've been in a cool pattern, a lot of cloudy weather, and so you can see that we're in the blues there, indicating wet areas. So even though we've had some below normal precipitation in the northwestern part of the state, the colder temperatures, mean that, again, that really hasn't extracted a whole lot of soil moisture. So we're not talking about any concerns there at this point. 7-day average stream flows. Again, consistent with the precipitation maps, we're much above normal to even high marks in southeastern Kentucky. And that's important because we're looking at the headwaters of a lot of our major river systems. And then when we get a little further downstream into the western part of the state, we're back more toward normal stream flow levels then. And again, it's actually taken a while to get down to that level after being wet throughout the winter months. 28-day map looks very similar. We do have in the western part of the state, when we average out over 28 days, we actually have a couple areas where we're looking slightly below normal, but for the most part, above normal in the southeast and close to normal, maybe a little bit above in other parts of the state. Current flooding, really no issues across the state. Things looking pretty good. Still have some high water levels on parts of the lower Ohio River, but no major concerns at this point. Again, it's actually, we've been fortunate this year. We've certainly had some flooding. There have been some flooding earlier in the year in southeastern Kentucky, but given how much rainfall we've had, we haven't had major issues to deal with. Now moving on to the U.S. Drought Monitor. And again, if you hone in on Kentucky, you can see that there's no drought within hundreds of miles of Kentucky, but there are some things to take note of around the country. You can see, as we had seen last month, when we get down to the Gulf Coast area, just very much in coastal locations, some drought conditions, nothing severe in that area. But as we go farther west and get out to the kind of Four Corners area and more across Colorado and into Kansas, some dry conditions have developed there, and there's been some concern among folks out in that part of the country. And we see some more drought conditions out in the Northern California, Pacific Northwest area. But again, nothing really pressing in our area. And drought can develop from any direction. It can develop as a core area over Kentucky, but for the most part, it usually kind of moves into the state from somewhere. And given that we don't have any drought anywhere in the vicinity, that's a positive thing for us. If we look at the change over the last month, drought status, you can see that conditions down in the southeast have improved. Actually. So, and again, that's probably an area that I pay attention to a little bit more because some of our droughts in the past, particularly the 2007 drought and then the 2016 late fall drought, both of those encroached from the south, but really seeing improvement there. The deterioration has been out in the western part of the country. And if you've been following the news and weather, you're aware that while it's been colder in the east, it's been warmer in the west and the southwest, and so the potential there for drought to start to intensify with that unusually warm weather pattern there. Now we'll start on impacts, and I'll talk a little bit about National Weather Service storm reports before handing it back to Megan to go up to our folks at UK to talk about ag impacts. So over the last 30 days, a lot of stormy weather, again, not surprising this time of year. I've got several days up there in April, kind of spread out about a week or less apart, even where we've had severe storms, in some cases non-thunderstorm wind events, and lots of reports of damaging winds. Had some hail reports across the state, a few minor tornadoes, but the main thing that stands out is the wind and the wind damage. And given how wet conditions are, makes it that much easier for wind to knock trees down and such. So a lot of reports, particularly in the eastern half of the state, but also quite a number farther west. So sort of south central part of the state largely kind of missed out on some of the severe weather this time around. So Megan, I'm going to send it back to you, and I think we've got a lot to talk about on the ag side here this month.
Thank you. So now we are going to have Matt Dixon and John Strang talk about some of the agricultural and horticultural impacts.
Thanks, Megan. Thanks, Stu. This first slide, it's been a very eventful beginning to the growing season here in Kentucky, to say the least. Spring has been in full bloom here recently. You can look at that picture in the bottom left. That's actually from a greenhouse I went to at Bywater Farms in Georgetown. Looking at this picture, they're all in a greenhouse. These flowers, they're right where they should be with these cold temperatures we're expecting in the days ahead. So after a very wet March, we started out April with warmer temperatures and much welcome dry conditions in place. This really helped speed up early season planting here in Kentucky for corn and beans. I included a table from the latest Kentucky Crop Progress and Condition Report there at the top. It was released on May 4th. 57% of corn is now in the ground. That's well ahead of that 5-year average of 41%. This is quite the change from years past, where it seems like we were behind. 28% of corn is now emerged. 25% of beans have been planted, while 9% has emerged, and 74% of winter wheat has headed. So looking to the right there at crop conditions, all crops, including livestock, are running in good condition for the most part right now. But with these cold temperatures in the forecast, we might see those numbers change. So while this is all good news, all these numbers above, sub-freezing temperatures made an appearance towards the middle of April. I write a weather summary for the crop report each Monday, and I record the state's average temp and precip based on data coming into the Ag Weather Center. That includes data coming from airports, from Kentucky measurement stations, so on and so forth. I calculate the deviations, and the map on the bottom right is a look at some of those temperature deviations. You can see most of the year thus far has seen above normal temperatures. There for a while, we only had 1 week of below normal temperatures through March. But you look at going into April, and that's changed drastically, especially these past few weeks. Temperatures have went well below normal. The bar that shows 10 degrees below normal in the middle of April is actually that week that contains our most recent damaging freeze here in Kentucky. If we can go to the next slide, we'll look more at it. Yeah, so most of the state dropped into the middle 20s to low 30s on the morning of April 15th. I think there was a couple nights there we dropped well into the 30s, but we even had some of the notorious cold spots like Cynthiana on the morning of the 15th drop into the low 20s. So quite the cold temperatures for this time of year. Normal lows for this time or for the middle of April run in the mid to upper 40s. So quite cool. Damage from this freeze was variable among various crops. From what I'm hearing, one of the more hard hit areas was horticulture. According to the crop report on April 13th, 55% apples were in bloom and 74% for peaches. Following that freeze event, the moderate to severe damage was reported at 43% for peaches and 46% for the apple crop. So both approaching that 50 percentile. So I believe Dr. Strang is going to talk more about the fruit impacts here in a moment. So moving to grain crops and whatnot, much of the bean crop was spared because most had not emerged at the moment. I heard mixed input on alfalfa and winter wheat damage. Most seem to be light in nature with just a small percentage of moderate to severe damage. In fact, looking at the crop report, it had 62% of alfalfa with no damage and 68% for winter wheat. So we might have escaped some there, but once again, some areas did see worse damage than others. You can see the post on Twitter down there in the lower left-hand corner from Carrie Knott, where she saw some stem splitting. Excuse me. I included a table to the side that shows a number of airport weather stations and mesonet stations across the state and how many hours those stations were below some of the threshold temperatures that are associated with injury. For instance, you look at the table in the upper left, some wheat was already beginning to head at the time and can be injured by 2 or more hours of 30 degrees or less. The majority of those stations over on the right saw multiple hours below 30 degrees, but once again, damage is dependent on what growth stage your crop is in, and temperature can vary greatly across the course of the county away from these stations. So bottom line, even though these stations show that you should have seen damage, you still have to go out and scout. So it's definitely a must. But those well below normal temps continued for the remainder of April and led to the first month of below normal temps since November. Rainfall returned over the second half of the month and cutting into some of that planting progress. If we can go to the next slide, we'll look at this upcoming cold snap. So I'm sure most, if not all of you, have been tracking the cold temperatures in the forecast. While we are going to see well below normal temps with multiple nights with temperatures in the 30s, the focus right now is tomorrow night, Saturday morning. Forecast temperatures could result in quite a bit of damage for Kentucky agriculture. Right now, forecast lows are in the middle to upper 20s for many across the eastern half of the state. That increases into the 30s farther out in western Kentucky. Believe they have middle 30s there on the map for western Kentucky, but talking with some of the personnel over there at the office, it sounds like latest model runs are turning cooler, and those numbers could very well come down. So putting these temperatures into perspective, I talked about normal lows in the 40s for the middle of April. Well, right now, early to mid-May, typically our normal lows are in the low to middle 50s. So about 10 degrees warmer on top of the middle of April. So we're talking 20, maybe 30 degrees below normal for some locations across the eastern half of the state tomorrow night. So these will be record-breaking temperatures. The NWS in Louisville and Paducah provide some info on those numbers. Some could break all-time record lows for May. Just going through some of this data I have in front of me from Louisville, the Louisville airport there, the record low was set in 1947, 1923. It was a tie of 33 degrees. Forecast low tomorrow night is 31. Lexington, record low tomorrow night is 31, set in 1923. Forecast low at 27. Bowling Green, record low 34 in 1960, and forecast low at 32. So you look at all these stations, and we're well below those record lows that have stood for quite a long time. And I got another one here from Paducah. Their record low is 36 for tomorrow night, and that was set back in 1960. So very cold temperatures on the way, and pretty rare. So freeze warnings are now in effect starting at midnight tomorrow night. You can look at that map at the lower half of the slide, and this will last into 10 a.m. for the eastern half of the state Saturday morning. So midnight tomorrow night to 10 a.m. Saturday morning, you're under a freeze warning. I want to say again, the focus is Friday night, but it looks like we have the potential to drop well in the 30s again on Saturday night across central and eastern Kentucky. So stay weather aware. We'll probably need more frost protection on some of those horticulture based plants. It is getting pretty late in the year to be seeing temperatures in the 30s, especially lows Friday night in the 20s. If we can go to the next slide, we'll look into that. Yeah, so I included a frost occurrence table, looking at frost occurrence data across the state. Based on climate normals, everyone across the state is already well past the average date we see our last freeze. This is the highlighted yellow column you see over there on the right. Just for instance, the average date we see our last freeze in Lexington is April 14th, so we're about 3 weeks past that now. As we get farther along into the spring season, our probabilities for a frost freeze obviously go down, they diminish. And right now, we really have a probability of less than 10% of seeing freezing temperatures right now, based on those normals. So the latest we've ever seen a freeze based on data between 1981 and 2010. These normals was actually May 18th. So this is somewhat rare. I looked at the past 30 years of data, and only twice has Lexington seen temperatures of 32 or less in May, and those happened in 2005 and 2002. So it's definitely been a while since we've seen sub-freezing temperatures in May. So if we can go to the last slide, I'll finish up. So all in all, this is on top of some of the damage that already occurred with the freeze events in the middle of April. But now we're looking at the potential for sub-freezing temps 3 weeks later. Concerns surrounding ag are high. Some corn and beans have already emerged, and some crops such as winter wheat are in those advanced stages. We talked about 74% of winter wheat is heading now. So it makes those crops even more susceptible to temperatures under 30 degrees. Just looking at winter wheat for a moment, I took some pics of wheat that headed at Spindletop farm yesterday at Lexington. Looking there on the left, I know that 74% of wheat is headed. Looking at heading, severe injury can occur with temperatures of 30 degrees or lower for 2 hours or more. And it looks like we're definitely going to get below that for the eastern half of the state. I want to let you know that Dr. Chad Lee, extension agronomist here at UK, he mentioned in a previous email recently that these temperatures are ballpark estimates, and such was the case with the earlier set of freezes in April. Damage was somewhat sporadic. Bottom line, there is the potential for severe damage, but you'll definitely have to go scout fields after the event. This does have the potential of being a killing freeze for some of the early planted beans that have emerged as that growing point is above ground. I took a picture while I was out at Spindletop yesterday of one of those fields, and some of those beans have started breaking the soil surface. But Dr. Carrie Knott said in a previous article that beans have yet to emerge, or if they have not emerged, they should be all right, but if they have, damage is likely. So corn won't be quite as susceptible because the growing point is still below the ground, but Dr. Lee did explain that shallow planting depth, less than an inch, the corn could still be at risk. So something to look at, but it will take time to see the extent of the damage for these grain crops, 5 to 7 days of warm weather. I included some of the links below for assessing freeze damage on corn, bean, wheat, and alfalfa below. I don't think you can click on it on this webinar, but I'll put the links in the chat box after I'm done, and maybe you can open them on your own web browser. Many of the agents on the call might already see these, but the potential for injury, of course, will extend to gardeners, orchards, and hort operations. And I know John will go into some of the specifics on those, but I also include an article here below that goes into some of the plant susceptibility and protection measures as it relates to horticulture. So looking ahead, let's first hope it warms up. Outlooks are tending to shift to some warmer weather towards the middle of the month, which is definitely what we want to see. The first cuts of hay and alfalfa will start soon. While corn and beans will keep going in the ground, tobacco will start up, and we'll start sending more of those warm season vegetable transplants to the garden. So that's what I have. I'm going to send it to you, Megan, or John. So thank you.
Thanks, Matt. John, if you want to go ahead, feel free.
Okay. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon and having the opportunity to participate. As Matt noted, we already have some serious fruit losses across the state due to the April 15th, 16th freeze. This injury is pretty variable depending on where you are in the state and the elevation of the orchard or the fruit planting. Of course, higher sites are warmer than lower sites. And on tree fruit, this is damage to the flowers and the small fruit. It's not damage to the trees or the leaves. For pome and stone fruit right now, 28 degrees Fahrenheit is 10% kill. And Matt's noted we're going to go below that pretty significantly. 25%, 25 degrees Fahrenheit is about our temperature and 90% kill. Now the standard weather forecasts at a 5-foot height are what we're talking about here today. If you're growing strawberries and down on the ground, this can be 2 to 4 degrees lower than the predicted temperature. So temperatures can be a little lower than what we've been talking about. If we can go to the next slide, Megan. These are some apples, and you can see some small apple fruit down here at the bottom. The one on the right is alive. The one on the left is dead. Generally, you can tell that injury the day after the freeze, the tissue browns up. When freezing first starts occurring, we have ice forming just under the epidermis or the skin of the flower or the small fruit. And this lifts the skin off of the fruit. This type of injury isn't lethal. The next area of the flower that's injured is the pistil, and the ice starts forming on the tip of the pistil. Now, this isn't lethal to the flower, but if you just have the pistil damaged and it hasn't been pollinated, that flower is not going to set. So then the ice moves down into the seed or ovary area of the flower. And of course, there's 10 seeds in a flower. You can see the flower here on the left that's injured. The pistil has been killed, the female part of the flower. And you can see that the seed or the ovary area is dead right here. Up on the top here, you can see that there are a number of flowers in a cluster of for an apple spur. And the first one to come out is the king flower. That's the biggest potential fruit generally for most varieties. Then we have 5 other ones that come out around the base of that. So we've got some variation in the frost hardiness of those flowers. The first one to come out is the most susceptible to freeze injury. Now, if we can take a look at the next one. Here we have some apples again, and you see frost rings on these apples. This is due to that epidermis being lifted off the surface of the fruit. The fruit in the lower left-hand corner have frost rings starting to form. This is where that skin does not adhere back down to the fruit very well, and we have what we call russet, which is a wound response on the part of the fruit to heal damage. These fruits will go ahead and be harvested, but they won't be very attractive. These are sold as frost-kissed fruit mostly, or they'll go into apple cider. Next picture. With pears, they're set up fairly similar to apples. You can see a injured pear flower on the right and an uninjured one on the left. And the pear fruit over here on the left, you can see a little bit of frost russeting on the pear. That's a picture from this year. I mentioned that we have 10 seeds in an apple and a pear, and sometimes we only kill a couple of those seeds or 3 seeds in the fruit, and we have several seeds that survive. These fruit will remain on the tree. Sometimes they have flat sides on them. They will not size up as well as a fruit that has 10 good seeds in it. Next picture. Peaches are more susceptible to injury. We've lost a lot of our peaches across the state, and the picture up here on the left is a shot from our Hort Research Farm here in Lexington. Those peaches look fine, but when you cut them in half, you can see some peaches laid out there. The peach on the left is alive because the seed is clear or white. The 4 peaches that are split open on the right are damaged and they won't develop. They'll drop off the tree, or as you see in the picture on the lower left, they'll remain on the tree and they won't size up. And a grower can't tell which fruit are going to size up and which aren't at this stage to thin off the cull fruit. So we have some problems with fruit production. You can see this little peach in the lower right-hand side where the ovary has been killed and it's turned brown. Next picture, please, Megan. Pawpaws, another native fruit crop for Kentucky. They are fairly sensitive. 30 degrees is a critical temperature for those, and We've seen a lot of brown flowers on those. Pawpaws tend to bloom over a fairly long period, so we may have a few more flowers coming out on those. I should mention about some of our other tree fruit crops. We had what we call a snowball bloom this year. They had a tremendous amount of flowers on, and when that occurs, we only need about 5% of those flowers on the tree to survive to get a full crop, but still the frost has taken off quite a few flowers and fruit. So when you hear we've got 50% flower injury on our apple trees, it could still be a full crop. So we have to wait and see what survives on the trees. Next slide, please. Grapes are a little bit different. They get the young shoots get damaged on those, and you can see a look down a cordon on one of our grapes at our Hort Research Farm. 30 to 32 degrees is a critical temperature for these. And the young flower clusters are on these young shoots. When those young shoots get killed, then we lose the flower clusters. Now, the bud on a grapevine is kind of unusual. It has 3 little buds in it. The first bud that comes out is the primary bud, and that has a full crop of grapes on it. If that one freezes off, generally we have a secondary bud below that that comes out that has maybe up to a half a crop of grapes. And if that one freezes off, there's a little tertiary bud down in there that will just produce shoots and won't produce any grapes. So we're not going to lose the vines this year, but we may lose a fair portion of the crop. Next slide, please. Blueberries, we are pretty much past bloom on most of our blueberries. You can see the small fruit starting to form there, and at this point 30 to 32 degrees Fahrenheit is about the critical temperature. Now, I should point out these critical temperatures that we're talking about are not exact. There is preconditioning on these fruit. If we have a lot of warm weather prior to the freeze, those fruit flowers and small fruit are not going to be as hardy as if we have cool temperatures preceding the freeze for a week before the freeze. So there's a little bit of variation here. Next slide, please. Blackberries and raspberries, again, the critical temperature is 30 to 32 degrees Fahrenheit. We can injure some of the young shoots on these coming out of the ground. You can see some raspberries on the lower right-hand side here that were burned back by the April 15th, 16th freeze. Some of those will sprout buds below the injury, but they will also send up new shoots from below the ground. You can see the blackberry on the left-hand side here. I've got a flower that's cut open. You can see that flower has already been killed on that one. And so the flowers that were out the furthest, or the buds that were most advanced, are the ones that are most sensitive to frost damage, and the ones that are back in the plant are probably alive and still coming along. Next slide, please. Strawberries are something that our growers are really worried about. We have 2 types of strawberries that we grow in Kentucky. There are the plasticulture strawberries, and they start blooming and fruiting like 3 weeks before our matted row strawberries. We've got some plasticulture strawberries on the left and matted row strawberries up on the upper right. We are already harvesting plasticulture strawberries. The critical temperature here is 30 to 32 degrees Fahrenheit for these. And you can see in the lower right-hand side of the screen, we have a live flower and a dead flower. The one with the dark center has been killed, and that won't produce a fruit. We can have partially injured flowers. Keep in mind that the center portion of that flower is composed of a whole bunch of pistils, or female portions of the flower, and each one of those is attached to one of those little achenes or seeds on the fruit. If some of those are damaged, we get a puckered fruit that is developed. Next slide. So our growers are using frost protection techniques. Most of them pull floating row covers over top. And that does a fairly good job of protection. We get maybe 2, 3, 4, 6 degrees of protection from a row cover, depending on how thick it is. And then we have very few growers that use overhead sprinkling. With overhead sprinkling, as that water freezes, it gives off its heat of fusion, or the latent heat. And that keeps that flower at about, or the small fruit at about 30 degrees or so. As long as you keep putting the water on, you can protect them. But this is a tricky process because you have evaporative cooling that's occurring at the same time. If we have a lot of wind, you have more evaporative cooling. If you don't put enough water on and you don't keep that water freezing, that temperature can drop below the actual temperature of the air and cause more damage than if you don't sprinkle irrigate. Sprinkle irrigating over top of a floating row cover is a surefire way to get everything through, but we don't have many growers that are set up like that. With overhead sprinkling, you have to wet that flower or small fruit once a minute with the sprinkler. You turn those sprinklers on when the temperature reaches about 34 degrees. If you wait down till it gets down to 32, you might find your sprinklers are frozen up and you're out there at 32 degrees trying to unplug them. Next slide, please. When I put this together, we were talking about a radiation freeze yesterday evening, and I think we're talking a little bit more about an advective freeze. Radiation freeze is where we have a clear, cold night. It's very still. And these are the types of freezes that we can protect against because we have an inversion layer up high that's a warm layer of air, and we can heat up to that inversion in some cases. With an advective freeze, we've got a cold polar air mass that's moving in with wind, and that's much more difficult to protect against. Next slide, please. Looking at some of the vegetable crops, the ones that won't have any problems, down to about 26 degrees Fahrenheit, they're maybe a little bit lower. Onions, peas, beets, Swiss chard, and lettuce. Next slide. A lot of our cold crops are safe, things like cabbage and kale and turnips and radishes. Next slide. Broccoli and cauliflower are the trick here. When we have cold temperatures on these, we can get bolting. This is where the plant flowers early, and you can see this little cauliflower plant on the lower left-hand side. That's not much to harvest there at the end of the season. So we do much better with broccoli and cauliflower when we plant these as a fall crop. It's a little more risky in the spring. Particularly as the heat comes up, these get stronger in flavor, and we don't have the quality that we get in the fall. Next slide, please. The ones that we're worried about are the warm season crops, things like tomatoes and eggplants, peppers, squash, cucumbers, and any of our melon crops, pumpkins, beans, okra, sweet potatoes. Then we have some other crops like potatoes. Potatoes come up early, but they can get frosted. The leaves get frosted back. Mine have been frosted back in my garden already, so I think they'll probably get frosted again. Sweet corn that Matt talked about a little bit earlier. If that growing point is down below the soil level, you're safe. But if it's up above the soil, we can have some damage to that. We're talking 31 to 33 degrees Fahrenheit is the critical temperature for these. And again, it's much colder down on the ground. Next slide, please. Asparagus, it gets frosted like this one on the right. So the frost does not, or the freeze does not kill the plant. It just kills the spear that's above the ground. So go out and cut the asparagus, and the new spears will come up and they'll be just fine. Next slide. So there's some misconceptions. Washing the frost off. I hear a lot of people say, I'm gonna go out in the morning and wash the frost off and save my plants. That's kind of bogus. You're gonna get evaporative cooling and cool those plants a little lower than the air temperature. And keep in mind that the coldest part of the night is it's sunrise. And when people overhead sprinkle to irrigate, the uninitiated may have been up all night and they decide the sun's up, they're going to bed, they shut the sprinklers off, and then they lose their crop. So you've got to leave those sprinklers on till a good portion of the ice is melted off of the plants. I see a lot of people after a frost forecast go out and put a plastic bag over their tree in the front yard and tie it around the trunk. That's not doing anything. First of all, plastic is not very good about holding heat in. It goes right through the plastic unless you've got a layer of moisture on it. And there's no heat source for a bag that's tied around the top of the tree. We're getting our heat from the soil that was stored up the day before or in the weeks before. So what can some of our growers do to protect their crops? We've talked about some of them. If it's a low growing crop, you can cover them with row covers. In the backyard, fabric sheets or blankets are much more effective than plastic, but you can use plastic to get a few degrees of protection. Straw works out very well. For orchards, at this point, it's a little hard to get overhead sprinkling going at the last minute, but you can, we used to use a lot of smudge pots and so forth, or return stack heaters out on the West Coast till fuel oil got pretty expensive, but occasionally growers will put small wood fires out in their orchards. It takes about 30 or 40 of those per acre to heat the air up. Remember, if you're trying to heat, you want a lot of small fires rather than one big fire. One big fire punctures the inversion layer, and we may not have an inversion layer if we have an advective freeze. So this type of heating may be kind of difficult to do. We've talked about overhead sprinkling. For the backyard, you can put a bucket over your plants, and that'll protect them just fine. I had a call from a grower that put plastic over his row of blackberries in his backyard, and he was going to put some heat lamps or a hibachi underneath of that plastic for the night, and that would get it through. Talked with one grower that was out pulling all his tomatoes up and putting them back in the barn, and he's going to plant them back out again next week. So I think I've got one more slide with a little bit of my contact information if anybody wants to get back with me. Thanks very much.
Thank you, John. And now we're going to look to the future at some of the things that we have coming up over the next couple of weeks. And I'm going to send it back to Dr. Foster.
Thanks, Megan, and really appreciate the very detailed information from Matt and John. Again, very unusual circumstances that demand a good bit of attention, a lot of excellent information to get out to folks. Not sure we want to look ahead though after what we just heard, so but I guess we need to do that. Take a look at precipitation, the 7-day quantitative precipitation forecast for Kentucky. You see some shades of blue showing up there, and basically we're anticipating about normal amount of precipitation over the next week or so, somewhere around an inch for most of the state. We'll see how that plays out. And we'll go on to then look at the next slide where we've got the 6 to 10 day outlooks on the left for temperature, on the right for precipitation. So left side, you can see that, again, we continue to have a strongly enhanced likelihood of below normal temperatures, especially up around the Great Lakes area. It extends down to Kentucky and into the southeast. So most of the state has a 50% chance or greater of being below normal temperature over the 6 to 10 days. On the right-hand side, precipitation, some slight indication that maybe we'll start drying out in the southeastern part of the state. A pretty weak signal there. And again, as you move to our west, you've got enhanced likelihood of above normal precipitation. So kind of we're probably near normal is a good guess for us here over the next 6 to 10 days. Look out a little bit farther to 8 to 14 days. Again, we're starting to see some hint that maybe the weather system's going to change a little bit, and we see some above normal temperatures becoming more likely in the southeast and stretching up to include Kentucky, and that pool of colder air associated with the trough over the east starting to diminish. We look at the right, we've got a slightly enhanced likelihood of above normal precipitation for Kentucky, but I think probably more significantly that extends across almost the entire country. So it probably gives us a little more confidence in that outlook for our area. Now, if we take a look at the entire month, and this was updated on April 30th, so we're already a few days into the month. Again, it really highlights the impacts of the cold weather pattern that we've seen. Ridge in the west, a trough in the east, very much a reversal of what we'd had a month ago and really through most of the winter. So slightly enhanced likelihood of below normal temperatures, but again, much of that is a reflection of what's happened already and what's going to happen here over the next few days. And then toward the end of the month, we expect the pattern to change. On the right-hand side, for the most part, equal chances of above or below normal precipitation. So no strong indications one way or another for Kentucky. Drier weather anticipated farther north. Again, we've had a colder area trough there, so the very little moisture advecting from really no moisture advecting from the Gulf of Mexico into that area. So that's what we see. The outlook discussion does indicate that as we get toward the latter part of the month, we expect temperatures to return to near normal or possibly above normal here later on in May. But first, we've got to get through the next few days. Seasonal outlook, likelihood of above normal temperatures across Kentucky and most of the country except for the central or the Great Plains and Northern Plains. Precipitation is slightly enhanced, about 40% chance of being above normal in terms of precipitation. So about a third chance of being near normal and then a reduced likelihood of being below normal. And again, we've seen that tremendous amount of persistence in terms of the wet pattern that's dominated our weather here for really a whole decade, even though we've had some periods of drought within that time. So kind of moving on from there, take a look at the monthly stream flow outlook from our friends up at the Ohio River Forecast Center. And again, really emphasizing the heavy precipitation amounts that we've seen in the southeastern part of the state, expecting much above normal stream flows over there in the Big Sandy Basin. And again, some of those areas we receive so much rain have been the upper portions of the drainage basin, so that water is going to work its way down, although we'll be holding some of that in reservoirs as we fill them toward the summer pool. Flood outlook, again, some areas where we might have some minor flooding. Again, that's based on really on more current conditions as opposed to looking out farther, I think. But we're getting into the time of year here in May and then looking toward the summer months where our risk of river flooding is going to be reduced. Always have that threat of flash flooding, particularly associated with heavy downpours with thunderstorms and so forth. And come back in with the wildland fire potential outlook. And we're in the below normal category, again, reflecting the very wet conditions we've had over the last several months. So summarizing all of this, in terms of a climatological perspective, our precipitation remains well above normal across the southeast. Northwestern areas have been below normal precipitation now for the last 30 to 60 days. Cooler than normal temperatures have led to lower atmospheric demand for water, so that eddy index was certainly not problematic for us at this point. Stream flows reflect that above normal precipitation pattern, but should become less of an issue going forward. Cooler than normal temperatures expected to continue in the short term, that 6 to 10 day outlook, but we expect a reversal of that pattern as we move toward the second half of the month going forward. And then the seasonal outlook, again, hints at a continuation of this anomalously wet period that we've been experiencing. So we'll see how all of this plays out. I think, again, our biggest concern is getting through the next few days here with the unseasonably cold temperatures on the way. So Megan, I'll send it back to you for any questions and discussion. before we move on and have Chip Zimmer with Division of Water introduce the Drought and Hydrologic Conditions Impact Reporter, which is going to be a really nice and valuable tool here for the state in terms of data collection, field data collection. So, Megan.
Thank you, Dr. Foster. Now we will have a short question and discussion section before moving on to Chip Zimmer's presentation. So if there are any questions, please feel free to either type into the chat box or you can unmute. We have just another few minutes just to see if anybody's typing anything out. All right, well, if anyone does have any questions, please feel free to email any of the people on the screen right now. I'll give you a second to copy those down, but we will also be sending out the recording of the webinar, so you'll be able to reference the email addresses then. So with keeping time in mind, let's go ahead and move on to Chip Zimmer's presentation of the Drought and Hydrologic Conditions Reporter.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Chip.
All right. I'm going to talk briefly here. I know it's late. I'm going to talk briefly about the Kentucky Drought and Hydrologic Impact Reporter. It's something that we've been working on for a couple of years now. Finally able to roll out. I was originally working on it with the Division of Water, and now it's going to be produced and hosted by WKU and the Kentucky Climate Center. And what this is it's a web-based collection app. It's using Survey 123, which is a Esri tool, and it's an online survey. And you can use it on a desktop browser, or you can also download an app. It's both iOS and Android, so you can use it on your smartphone, your tablet, whatever. So pretty much any type of device you have, you can use this to submit a report. And I've designed this to be as a quick survey that condenses down so you don't have to scroll through lots of questions. So it can be done make it simple and can be done quickly, especially it's helpful for farmers and other people who are working out in the field, not having to be bogged down scrolling through a bunch of questions. The survey results will be displayed on an Esri story map, which I'll be talking about here too, and it'll be available to the public. And the way we are going to be producing this, the impact reporter is going to be produced on a yearly basis, the survey is. So we'll come up with another one in 2021. So if there's anything that you think should be added or changed or anything like that, feel free to submit feedback to myself or Stu Foster, and we will take that into consideration and try to make the 2021 survey even better. Next slide. Just a real quick, brief overview of the survey. The survey pictures are over on the right. The first few questions are name, affiliation, and those will be anonymous. So they're required questions to fill in, but on the story map and anything else, they will not be posted. So you don't have to worry about any information being out to the public if you want to stay anonymous. So, for the county, entering the county, all you have to do is start typing in your county name, and it'll bring up the county. So especially if you're in a longer name county, a Christian or Breathitt or something like that, saves a little time. You start typing in the name and it pops up. Next slide. One of the great things about this is it lets us record your location. So if you are on a tablet or phone, anything with GPS, it should automatically pin where you're at. So if you're taking the report right there in the field, you can just, it'll show right there. You don't have to worry about setting it or anything. Unfortunately, if you're on a browser, you do have to manually move it around. But obviously, if you're on a browser, you're probably not sitting in the field or wherever you were that you saw the impact. So, but that is a nice thing that it'll show exactly where the impact is being located at, or took place at. Next slide. And this will be the last mandatory question. It's how wet or how dry it is. And I won't go through, you can, when you're taking it, you can read and see what is defined as severely dry or severely wet and so on. But your answer to this question dictates what questions will come next. And like I said, this is the last mandatory question. So if this is all you want to fill out, it still helps us, to see what conditions are there, though actually putting in impacts helps even more. If you click on any of the dry questions, or if you click on any of the dry answers, it'll take you to the drought impact questions. If you click on any of the wet ones, it'll take you to the excessive rainfall impacts. And if you click near normal, it'll come up with an option. Do you want to report a drought or an excessive rainfall impact, or do you have no impacts? And you're just saying, hey, everything's near normal. There's nothing else going on. So that's kind of a important question there to kind of guide you where you're going next. Next slide. So with the drought impacts, there are multiple different types of impacts that you can select from. And when you select them, when you select on one of those impacts, it'll bring up more questions. So if you're only wanting to work with, say, livestock impact, you don't have to scroll through all the other types of impacts. It's just going to bring up the two or three questions that are for livestock. And you can select multiple ones. You can select all of them, bring up all the questions, and put in impacts for all of them. So you're not limited to just one type of impact. But if you just want to do for one section, it helps speed up the process. Next slide. So and this is just an example. These are the three questions that are going to come up. If you put in crop, it's going to ask you what your crop health is, the type of crop that's being impacted, and also what impacts you're seeing. The same thing's going to come up with livestock, and then all the other categories, it's just going to have one question saying what type of impact you have. So again, it's a fairly simple and quick process. And you can select multiple impacts. So if you are, so you're not limited, again, not limited to just one impact. You can select as many as there are. I know some of the other impact reporters that other states have, you can only put in one impact. And so then you have to submit a whole new report to show the next impact. So we decided that was not an efficient way of doing it. So we are going through it so you can put in multiple impacts at once. Next slide. And the last thing that you're going to come up with, and it's a very important one, is we have the ability to upload pictures using Survey 123. So if you are reporting impact and you can take a picture and upload it, it'll show up on the story map, and it's also something we can look at to really kind of get a better idea of what's going on, and especially helpful if a farmer or somebody is taking pictures. They submit a report, and then 2 weeks later they submit another report, and they take a picture from that exact same spot. We can see the progression of how things are deteriorating in that area. And like it says, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So I mean, the pictures are really a valuable thing to see. Next slide. All right, you don't have to play it. You can just let it go, Megan. This is the story map that this is going to be displaying the information, and this is just showing the different impacts. at the bottom there, it is there is a slide there that shows the time progression. So as impacts, you can go back and see how the impacts were located and how many of them there were, throughout the year. So if you were looking at last year's, if we had this for last year, it would have been one of those where you saw almost no drought impacts throughout the summer. And then all of a sudden in September, you would have seen drought impacts start popping up left and right as we got into that really intense but short-lived drought last September. So I think that's a really cool tool to have so you can see how they progress throughout the year. Next slide. And this is just, again, talking about each tab at the top there is showing a different impact. So the first tab is just showing where all the impacts are. And then there's one for how wet and how dry it is. And the rest will just be showing the impacts for that specific sector. So if you're interested just in, livestock, you can just go and see the surveys or the impacts that report just for livestock. So again, it's something that's going to be handy for looking at different sectors. Next slide. And every one of these dots is selectable. So you can click on it and see exactly what was submitted. You can see the pictures. And again, it'll be anonymous, so the name and stuff will not show up on that when you click on it. Next slide. So who do we want reporting? I think first and foremost, I think having county-based organizations, Extension Service, Farm Bureau agents, NRCS, I think having them, because we have them spread across the state, and they're working directly with farmers. So having them reporting on a regular basis every time they go out and they see an impact, having them pull out their phone and submit a report would be great. And originally, part of the rollout was we were going to go, talk to these groups, and try to talk to them about the impact reporter. Obviously, that's not going to be happening anytime in the near future. So we're going to have to kind of alter that. But hopefully, once all the coronavirus stuff goes away, or we get however works out, we can start working with these groups and meeting with them and kind of getting this out there to them. The next one is farmers. Farmers are, for the agriculture part, they're the ones that get impacted the most during drought, I think. So and that's information that we don't normally get from when we're doing drought monitoring. So getting those impacts from farmers, from across the state would be very helpful. And then just, citizen scientists and general public. And the reality is we want everybody to report. I mean, the more impact reports we get, the better. Missouri created one of these in 2018, and they had a really bad drought in part of the state that year. And they received over 1,000 reports, which really helped them kind of zoom in on where the hardest hit areas were. So the reality is we want to get this out, excuse me, and get everybody working, reporting. So I think that'd be great. So the more people we have doing it, the better. Next slide. So this is where you can find it. Excuse me. There's the website for the impact reporter. You can also download the Survey 123 app on your phone or device, and just look for the Kentucky Drought and Hydrologic Impact Reporter 2020. There's also a QRL code, and then the website for the story map is there on the bottom. And that is all that I have.
Chip, thanks. I wanted to just interject here. First of all, I want to really express my appreciation to Chip there for taking the initiative to develop this project. Again, this has been something he's been working on for quite a while there. And I know that Chip has worked very closely with folks at the National Drought Mitigation Center to make sure that we develop a product here and or a tool that can integrate well with what they're doing in terms of more of a national perspective. But I just want to make a plea and to folks out there to participate, because drought is such a challenging hazard to deal with compared to other weather and climate related hazards. So, you know, when you have a tornado, you kind of know when it happened and where it happened, but drought develops slowly and it's difficult to document. There's that kind of analogy to the old notion of if a tree falls in the woods, but there's nobody there to hear it, did it make a sound? So in the case of drought, you know, if it gets dry, but you're not seeing any impacts, was it really a drought? So we need to be able to document impacts, and especially I think in the agricultural sector, because that's the canary in the coal mine, so to speak, in terms of where impacts show up first. And so if we want to really get a handle on drought early warning, and it's important to identify those impacts, they really corroborate what the data is showing, so that it gives us more confidence, so that instead of just saying, well, it seems like it's getting dry out there, maybe we're starting to see a drought develop, it gives a confirmation that, yeah, we're seeing impacts, they're accumulating, and the ability to bring this information in through this tool that Chip's developed and be able to map it, integrate it in a GIS environment is really, really valuable to us. So really encourage you to participate with this, and we'll be working, as Chip mentioned, we're not exactly sure how it's going to happen, but we're going to really work to try to market this and get participation across the state. So Megan, I'll send it back to you, and I guess we've got time if anybody has a comment or question about the impact report or presentation or anything we've seen before, we can take that. And then otherwise, we appreciate everyone's time today. We know we've gone quite a bit over what we normally do. So Megan?
All right, we'll go ahead and open the floor for any questions or comments regarding the reporter, or if you've thought of any questions for the rest of the presentation. All right, thank you, everyone. So if there are no questions, we'll go ahead and conclude. Our next regularly scheduled webinar will be Thursday, June 4th at 1 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Eastern. And we will be sending out a link with this recording, and I will make sure that we include the agricultural impact links that Matt Dixon talked about earlier, as well as the information on the impact reporter and story map. So with that, I hope that everyone has a good day, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you.